Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. A very warm welcome to everyone joining us today. Komuskan Tokuingua, and I'm honored to be here as the national representative of Students and Early Career Statisticians Network of NZSA. It's a real privilege to open today's webinar. We will be diving into some incredibly important korero in a relaxed podcast style format. We are thrilled to have you all with us. Thank you for taking the time to be part of this. And before we dive in, I'd like to introduce James Bristow. James is a network representative and is currently completing a PhD in statistical epidemiology at Massey University. His research focuses on impacts of climate change on pathogens and food systems using Bayesian and spatiotemporal modeling approaches. He has a strong background in data science and a real passion for turning complex modeling into meaningful insights. And we are lucky to have him guiding today's corridor. So, with that, I'll hand it over to you, James.
Thank you, Ms. Gann. So as mentioned, the topic for today is career progression in statistics and data science. We'll be covering the journey from university study to industry roles. Our guest speakers for today will share their own insights and advice. As mentioned, the discussion will be in a relaxed podcast format. I have a set of questions that are prepared for our speakers. So we're really aiming for around 40 to 45 minutes of discussion and around 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A with the audience closer to the end. So before we begin, I think we should start with introductions. So our three guest speakers for today are members of the data science group at what was previously called Plant and Food Research. Now it's the Bioeconomy Science Institute, or BSI, following a big merger amongst the Crown Research Institutes. Our first guest speaker is Olivia Angelin Bonnet, who works as a statistical scientist. Would you like to talk a little bit about yourself, Olivia?
Yeah, thank you, James, and hi, everyone. So as James said, I'm Olivia. I'm a statistical scientist at the Plant and Food Research Group of now the new BSI. I'm based in Palmerston North, and I am working on analyzing omics data that come mostly from fruits and plants, and in particular doing multi-omics data integration. And I have a big love for developing visualization, reproducible research, and I love writing R packages. As you can probably tell by the accent, I'm not from New Zealand. I'm originally from France, and I did my studies in France in what we call an engineering school, where we don't learn about engineering, but I don't know why they call it this way. And it's gives us the equivalent of a master, where we can learn some fundamental of science and then choose a specialization. So mine was bioinformatics, statistics, and modeling. And then I thought that where could I go as far away as possible from home to do a PhD? And New Zealand, I don't think you can go further away from France. So I joined New Zealand. I came to New Zealand 8 years ago now to do a PhD in statistics at Massey University. After that, I became for a little while a lecturer in statistics at Massey before I joined Plant and Food Research as I said, as a statistical scientist. So I'm really happy to be here and talk about career progression.
Great, thank you, Olivia. So our second speaker is Tom Moore, who also works as a statistical scientist, actually in the same team as Olivia. So would you like to introduce yourself, Tom?
Kia ora koutou. Yes, I'm based down in Lincoln at the head of the new BSI, and I've got a bit of a different background to everyone else on this call in that I did my studies in freshwater ecology. So I did my master's in Canterbury on nitrates issues on the Canterbury Plains, and then went up to the Waikato and did my PhD on freshwater mussels, and then came across from the ecology side of things to do statistics with the PFR group. And so it was a bit of a different and very much more applied. And the tools I kind of use and try and sort of push forward are causal inference and Bayesian statistics, and try and get traction in those spaces.
Cool. Great, thank you, Tom. So last but not least, we have Hannah Liang, who works as a data scientist. Would you like to talk about yourself, Hannah?
Yes. Yeah, I'm Hannah. I'm a data scientist based in Auckland. I'm in the data application team, under the same group of Olivia and Tom. My work involves building statistical or machine learning models and optimizing mechanistic models and work with deep learning models for computer vision project. I sometimes also work with developing user interface. I graduated from the University of Auckland 3 years ago with a bachelor degrees in data science. And I'm now studying part-time for my master degree in data science. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anna. So just before we begin, just want to mention that this webinar is being recorded, so everyone can always access it at a later date. So now I think we'll just jump into the questions for the speakers. So I think we can begin with a nice easy one, hopefully. So what is one fun fact about each of you?
Okay, maybe I can get started because it's related to career progression. So ever since middle grade, I found a book in the library with a list of job titles. And I knew I wanted to do something related to biology. And I found the word microbiologist. And I decided that's what I was going to do. And I stick to it all the way through to high school, engineering school. And I thought that really I was going to become a microbiologist because it sounded cool. And then I had my first microbiology lab, and you have to dip stuff in alcohol to sterilize them. And I managed to set the pot of alcohol on fire on my first lab. So I decided maybe that's not for me, actually. So that's how I came to statistics and not microbiology.
A fun fact about me that isn't statistic related is what I do in my spare time. So if you can just imagine what an inflatable chair looks like going down a whitewater rapid, and that's what I like to do in summer. So they're called river bugs, and they got like inflatable pontoons, and you go down grade 3, grade 4 water, and it kind of looks like an inflatable chair, and it's kind of a bit silly, but it's good to like get some downtime outside of doing work. So that's what I like to do. Although this time of year we're kind of more in the warm pool rather than out in the wintry conditions.
Yeah, a fun fact about me, maybe related to data science. I didn't know data science need to do programming, when I first decided to choose data science. Yeah, but when I start studying it, need to do programming, and I was getting a very low score at the midterm test. Yeah, but now I'm getting used to it, and I'm happy with doing programming, in data science.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you, guys. So that's a nice, easy question. So I guess my next question would be, how did you end up working within statistics and data science in the first place? So why statistics and why data science, and what do you love about it?
Well, actually, I'm gonna go first just because it is a perfect link to what Anna was saying. For me, it was the opposite. I've miserably failed at being a real biologist in the lab, but at the same time, I had an introduction to programming, and I realized that I loved it. And so I ended up studying bioinformatics and statistics because it was a perfect mix of biology, which was a subject that I loved, but programming was the thing that I loved doing. And little by little, I drifted, and that's how I ended up in statistics, but applied to a biological setting. So that's how I got into it. But I didn't really think actually until I joined plant and food research that I was going to be in this kind of role, because during my PhD, when I heard people were doing kind of becoming statistical consultant, I thought that was very scary because it means you have to work on a range of different projects. You have to know a lot about statistics, and I felt that I really wasn't ready. And then I studied at Plant and Food, and here I am in a type of consultant-like role. I didn't really end up, thought I was going to end up there, but I really love it.
I can go next. I didn't expect to be in this position at all. Having finished freshwater ecology, I did a bit of statistics during that time, but I hadn't actually officially trained. I think I've done one statistics course in my entire career up to this point, but the skills you kind of learn and develop for the PhD kind of translated across quite nicely. And it was all about trying to sort of model the data generating process. And when I got interviewed, I was surprised to realize that how useful my skills were to be applied to plant and food. And it's been an amazing journey to sort of really get into a diverse range of projects and really sort of use those applied skills. And I'm sort of learning backwards. sort of learning the sort of theory and why we do certain things, because I'm very applied, to sort of realize why I do certain things and why we do certain things and what questions they can actually address. Yeah. Hannah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so what I end up doing in data science, because I was good at calculus and statistics when I was in the middle school, and I thought like data science would be something related to that, so I choose it. But again, I didn't expect it will involve so much programming. But now I enjoy like both a mix of statistics and computer science.
Yeah, thank you, guys. There's a nice diverse array of answers. So my next question is, what do you do in your day-to-day job, and what didn't you expect you would have to do and learn?
Okay, maybe I can get started again. So in my day-to-day job, there's a lot of programming. That's most of the things that I do. But surprisingly, what I didn't expect is a lot of this programming is data cleaning. So when you learn about statistics at university and you do statistic course, you always get presented this nice and clean spreadsheet or this nice table that has all of the data you need for the analysis. And actually, I find that maybe 60% of my time on analyzing some data for a project will be cleaning the data and putting it into the shape that is ready then for doing the analysis. So I spend much more time cleaning the data usually than doing the analysis, which I wouldn't have guessed beforehand. Otherwise, I do a lot of data visualization, which I'm really happy about, especially because I work with very large data sets. It's the kind of data where you can't show a table. It wouldn't be very meaningful. So the only way that you can interact with the data is through visualizations. And visualization is a really large topic. And I really enjoy learning about effective visualizations or all the tips and tricks that you can do to make your plots look nicer. And yes, sometimes it involves spending 1 hour choosing which color palette you're going to use, because that is important as well. And the last thing that I spent a lot of time doing that, again, I wasn't really expecting, is communicating with people. And it can go through having to write report for the people who have asked you to look at their data, or it can be through presentation or like formal presentation or formal talk that you would give, but also just meetings where you present the data. And that's also something that I found, like, it's not something you would learn about when you're doing a statistic degree, not really, but actually it's very important. And the skills that you need to have are non-trivial, like learning how to communicate with people who are expert in their domain, but not expert in statistics, is something that I spend a lot of time working on to try and improve.
Yeah, I agree. Day-to-day communication between the scientists is the major thing that I kind of do. And there are kind of different ways of kind of communicating. And some scientists are kind of happy with sort of more of a sole trader kind of style of communication, like here's the data, can you please generate these insights, and they'll go away and then they come back. So there's those kind of style of projects, but there's also other styles of projects which are more project-led. And I can kind of show scientists where we can go with data science, like can we use network science, or can we use different ways of visualization or modeling techniques and that kind of thing. And those projects really engage me a lot as well. And those two contrasts are quite interesting in the day-to-day. And meeting people where they're at in their statistical journey is very important. I love causal inference and trying to sort of bring those kind of methodologies into PFR, but that isn't always where people are at when it comes to just wanting to visualize the data and just see differences between means. And that's fine. So chatting is a lot, and being on site is really important to do that. It's kind of hard a bit to do it remotely. But being on site, people sort of pull you aside and go, oh, you're the stats person. All right, we'll interrogate you about what we can do with it. I run a statistical drop-in session called Argon Jargon, and that often brings people in who are like doing PhDs and who are doing research, and we just discuss sort of modern techniques about how you may look at your data, and that's really good. Yeah, I might leave it there. Hannah?
Yeah, I really agree with you both. Like, yeah, also same for me. Like one thing I didn't expect is how much time I spent in meetings. I used to think about job would be just like about working on tasks quietly. But actually communication and collaboration will take up a big part of the work.
I love that you
Thanks.
say that, Hannah, because that's also something I realized when I started working at Plant and Food is like, oh my God, how many meetings per day can you fit? But actually, it turns out it's quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys. So my next question is sort of following up on something you've just mentioned, which is communicating with scientists. So what has your experience been like working within teams? So data science teams, statistics teams, and multidisciplinary and cross-functional teams where you have to work with scientists and researchers?
Yeah, I found that working in a team of statisticians is really nice. When you're doing a PhD, you're of course surrounded by other students who are doing a PhD in statistics or a master in statistics, and your supervisors are in statistics. So it wasn't really like a total difference. It's really good to be in a team where people are doing similar things. They talk the same language, but at the same time, every time we speak, I realize how vast the field of statistics is and how different things can people do. We are all statisticians, but we do very different things. And I would never be able to do what other people are doing, or even data scientists. I mean, I use the term interchangeably. Like we do very different things. So it's really nice to have a team where you can see different ways of approaching a problem, and you can talk about, like, give advice and share experience. And at the same time, working in a project team where you're the statistician or you're the data scientist, and then there's other experts, is really cool because you learn a lot from these other people. Like, I don't know much about fruit, but every time I'm working on a data set, I would learn something new about the fruit or the plant that I'm working on. And again, it comes back to the fact that it's a nice exercise in communicating, because you need to be able to talk to these people about the results that you got without going into the jargon, the same way you would communicate your results to your team. So even if you're talking about the same project, if you're talking to your team or talking to the scientist, it's going to be a completely different approach. And yeah, it's really nice to have to do both. But at the same time, it can be a bit intimidating because when you say that you're a statistician, people often think that you know all of statistics, and it's really not the case. And so it can be hard to have to, when people ask you a question, not having an answer on the spot and being able to say, oh, actually, I don't know, let me ask my colleagues about that.
Yeah, it's great being part of a team because you can work out about how many different ways there are to call the same thing. Like if someone says like they want to have like a mixed effects model, you're like, okay, it's a hierarchical model or it's this type of model, but they're all the kind of the same thing using different words to explain the same concepts. So having people from very different disciplines, very different ways they apply those techniques and then bring it back to be able to communicate and work out which ones are the same is really important. Like yesterday, I had a chat with a data scientist, and we're talking about like network science and nodes and edges, and they talk about like attributes and embedding and different ways of thinking, which is more from the data science perspective rather than sort of network science perspective. And then you got someone who's a applied mathematician, and they're doing like graph theory and applying that kind of lens to it as well. So it's interesting when you've probably got similar problems sometimes and just coming at from different angles and like having a team to be able to bounce ideas off and actually work out, oh, we're in that space, we can apply these tools. It's really good. I'll just add that. Yeah. Hannah?
Yeah, my experience working with my team it has been quite positive. Like everyone in my team is really helpful and very friendly. They're always willing to help. When I first started working in plant and food research, I was a bit nervous to ask questions because I don't want to bother people. But one of my colleagues told me that everyone loves talking about what they know, so just feel free to ask. So I keep that in mind, and yeah, and this is also take much less time for you to complete the task, because you will, if you are not asking, you will be just struggle on your own for days. For working with data with scientists or researchers, Yeah, I also find they are quite open and also friendly too. Like what Olivia said, they can teach you something you never know. Like they have their own expertise and they know something in their area, but you are as a data scientist or statistician, you might not know that knowledge. Yeah, and the other things also very similar is the ways to talk to them will be different. Um, you don't you shouldn't expect they know what you know in your technical area. So it is important to explain the things clearly and simply.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, I know I've certainly learned a lot from working with the plant physiologist here at Plant and Food. So my next question is going to be a tough one. It might get us into trouble. Python or R?
R 100%. I'm biased.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've used Python, but I started using Python when I already knew R really well. And I found that it was super hard to switch and to try, like, there's something really simple that I know how to do in R, but how do I write it in Python? For example, why would you start indexation with 0 rather than 1?
I prefer R because it's what I've learned and always have learned. And most of the things I can do in R. But I can see places in the future where Python's going to start pushing ahead, particularly in the Bayesian inference space, using PyMC, which can use GPU acceleration, where Stan using R's front end can't. So there may be places in the future where I need to swap to Python, but for the moment, I'm happy in R. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I'm slightly different. I use Python more, mainly because my work involves training large model, um, like some very big pre-trained computer vision model. So Python will be more suitable. Like because there are some package like PyTorch or Transformer, it make it easier to fine-tune the model and speed up the training. Yeah, but for projects like need to do a lot of data visualization or pre-processing, I also prefer using R because it has some very helpful library that can make some high quality plots. And I also like using R Markdown that you can test your code block very easily without having to run the whole script.
Yeah, I agree with your comment, actually. I mean, for jokes, yeah, I'm 100% R, but I find that it's not so much of a debate as like whatever you've learned first and whatever is most useful to you, that's gonna get you there, gonna get the job done is good enough. And I really like that in the recent years, there've been a lot of trying to integrate or make common resources. And I know a lot of work that the POSIT team, the POSIT company is doing with Quarto, for example, is trying to cater to both R, Python, and Julia audiences or more people. And I really like this approach of rather than being a combat, you're dipping into what fits best your needs. And I'm actually starting to do a little bit of machine learning. And for now, I'm clinging to R desperately, but I know that Python would probably have some really great resources for that.
I'm definitely a Python person myself, but that's okay. So let's dig a bit deeper into that. So in terms of the sort of work that you do, so what are the common problems that you've faced, and what kind of tools and packages have you used to resolve them? So maybe R or Python packages, for instance, and what makes these packages useful for your work?
I can start with this one if you like. So I'm a Bayesian, so I use Stan. To interact with that, I use a front end called BRMS, which is very flexible to specifying a whole range of different types of models. And if I ever get to the point where I need to code directly in Stan, then I know I'm in trouble because it's very diverse. So people are very familiar with generalized linear mixed effects models. So that's kind of the bulk of what we do. And if you can meet people at that level, you can get to about 90% of people who want work done. If you want to go beyond that, then it caters for that as well. I've tried to push sort of non-linear type styles of modeling and like multi-level correlated effects style modeling and this kind of thing. But for the most part, it's mostly generalized linear mixed effects models. and trying to sort of get that over the line of why you do that and how does that fit the experimental design. Yeah.
Yeah, Hannah mentioned using R Markdown, and I was using R Markdown a lot, and now I switched to Quarto, but it's kind of the same approach to literate programming, which I use a lot for writing reports because I found that, as Hannah said, there's a lot of data visualization in the job that we have to do. And I know Tom also does really amazing reports. And like when you want to do visualization and then give the report back, you don't want to create your visualization, then copy paste to a Word document. But a lot of the scientists that we work with typically would like to have Word reports. So with Quarto or R Markdown, it's really easy to have the code to generate the figures and then automatically generate from that a Word report without having to do a lot of copy pasting. And it's also very helpful for creating presentations. I've become really enamored with the Reveal.js presentations that you can do in Quarto, where you can really, it's a nice way of having code in your presentations whenever you do like a R talk where you have to show some code and show progression through lines of code. I found that very, very helpful.
Yeah, Quarto is fantastic because you can have the devil details hidden under sort of various tabs and that kind of thing, but have the big story right there. So for different audiences, you can have like the story, then have the nitty gritty in the background. Yeah.
Yeah, so for the package, I mostly use the Plotly package. This is both available in Python and in R. This is really good for doing data visualization because the plots in you can make interruption on the plots, like disable one of it or move the plot. Yeah, this is one library I use quite often in both R or Python when doing creating some user interface.
Okay, thanks, Gilles. Let's move in a completely different direction now. So both Tom and Olivia, they have PhDs. Hannah is currently doing a master's. So my next question is, why did you decide to do a PhD? How was your experience while you were doing your PhD? And for Hannah, would you consider doing a PhD?
Tom, do you want to start with that one?
I can. I can give my experiences about being a PhD. I don't want to put Hannah off. It was great. Freshwater mussels are really cool. Quickly, they are cool because they're parasites. So freshwater mussels release little larvae, and then they attach onto fish, and they need these fish to reproduce because they get nutrients out of them and drop them off. And so this is a really interesting ecological system. And I was seeing how invasive species can impact that. Like, can they use non-native fish to do that reproductive cycle or not? And I loved it. It was a great experience, but towards the end, it is very much a lone wolf kind of style exercise. I know some groups are more inclusive than others, but when I got towards the end, it was kind of like me just battling with my code or writing a chapter and trying to get it done. So like afterwards, there definitely was a period where I needed to like recharge and like look after my mental health and that kind of thing. So it took about like 6 months to sort of get back, energy and that kind of stuff again. So it's definitely a toll and it definitely is a commitment and you definitely feel like an imposter. But at the end of it, you get some cool results and you can say you made a difference to mussel conservation, which no one else really has done. So because they're, not very popular, I suppose. So I don't regret doing it at all. I learned some amazing skills and met some amazing people. So yeah, pick the right subject that you're passionate about. It'll be great.
Nice. I feel like an imposter talking up after Tom because I worked on potatoes, which are not as exciting as the mussels. But nevertheless, it was very fun. So I decided to do a PhD because, in all honesty, when I finished my engineer degree, so the equivalent of a master, I kind of felt that I wasn't competent enough to start a job, to find a job. I felt I didn't have enough knowledge. And so doing a PhD was kind of a bridge to get more knowledge and more experience before starting a real job. So that's how I got into it. And now that I think about it, when I look at people who are doing a PhD, but they've already had some work experience, I think it's a nice way of approaching it. But for me, at the same time, the PhD was a good way to learn how to be professional when you're working on a project. And at the same time, it's kind of a sandbox environment because you have this one project that you're focused on. And when working on a PhD, it seems like a lot of work and it seems like there's so many things going on. But then when you start a job like at somewhere like Plant and Food, you realize actually you have that, but times 10 maybe, because you're working on 10 different projects. Maybe they're not as big, but you have to divide your attention. So I found that doing a PhD was a nice way of learning a lot of skills while being dedicated to one single project. And a lot of the skills that I learned, things like not in terms of statistics, but managing your data, managing your time, interacting with other people, like doing reports, etc., were super useful. And it was a nice way of developing these skills because you're still considered a bit of a student, so it's okay. Like people can teach you things and they can mentor you. So that was quite nice. That being said, I totally relate with Tom, and I remember that after 2 years in particular, I was kind of, why did I do that? And I was so ready to be done. And there's so much pressure, especially by yourself, because it feels like writing the PhD is such a big undertaking that there's a lot of pressure on you. And you always wonder, are you going to finish? Is it going to be good enough? Is it going to be considered a big enough advancement? I certainly feel like I made absolutely no difference in the potato industry. Like no one particularly cares about my results. But still, you learn so much from it that I think it's a really nice experience to have. That being said, I think being more mature when you're doing your PhD is probably something that's good, because maybe you approach all of these challenges and all of this pressure in a different headspace. So hopefully, Hannah, that didn't give you too much of a negative view.
Yeah, yeah, these are all some very good motivation. For me, yeah, I'm really open to it. Like if I can find a topic that really interested me, um, yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, so sort of following up on that question, what has been the most useful and the least useful thing you've learned at university that you've taken in your day-to-day job?
This one is easy. For me, I have an easy answer, and that was how to use GitHub. I learned that during one of my courses, programming courses at uni. And that's the thing that when I started my first internship after uni, they required us to put all of your code on GitLab, and I already knew kind of what it was, etc. And then when I went to do my PhD, I was already used to using GitHub. And so I used it for all of my code. And it helped me so much being organized and having not like 10 different versions of the code, but having them in a nice place with version control, etc. And it's a skill that I'm using like every day. All of my code is on GitHub, etc. It's usually something that companies will want you to do, even if you're not required to. It's always a nice practice to have. So I think that's the most useful thing that I've learned. And the least useful, I'm not really sure, because everything that I've learned, even if it wasn't directly relevant, it helped me in some way just knowing that a certain field exists or just broaden my thinking. Like if I learned some things at uni that I thought I would never see again, but now that I'm working on different projects, I hear these words and they are kind of familiar. So even if I don't remember everything, I remember that I know about that to some extent, and I know where to look for information.
I think for me, like the tools I use every day, like Git and how to like interact with the cluster and POSIT and these kind of useful things. I didn't learn any of those things in my PhD, in my studies at all. Like it's always learning on the job. But what I did learn from my studies is like how to fit biological questions into statistical models and how to make that link. So I understand where the scientists come from and then fitting that as we're going forward. That's the most valuable thing I think I've learned. Yeah. And the most non-valuable thing I think I've learned, oh, that's easy. I mean, like, I've never done an ANOVA by hand since doing my job here. Like, I did it once. You don't need to do it again. I get it. Like, it gets you through the mechanics of it. And I think, Olivia, actually, you might have done a PCA as well by hand, but it's just like,
Yeah, now
yeah,
that you
I'm very
say it,
applied.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's useful, but I've never done it again. Hannah, what about you?
Yeah, I think something like manual work is not that useful. Like for example, when I'm learning decision tree or random forest, we need to build a decision tree ourselves. Yeah, but it really helps you to understand how it works. But like at work, you don't need to do it yourself. You can just call a library and run 2 lines of code and it will finish it for you. Um, yeah, and the other things I think is least useful, like more specifically will be something I just learned this semester is about XML data model. Like we need to know how to write XML queries or using XML path. But the XML model um is still quite outdated now, and it is also hard to maintain, and most of them has been replaced by format like JSON. Yeah, and I haven't used it UXML in my current work. So if I have to say something that is least useful, I can think of this one. Um, for the most useful, yeah, I think everything, most of the things I learned from the university are quite useful. Um, yeah, maybe the most useful part would be I was I has been introduced to a wide range of models, like statistical model, machine learning models. So whenever I will need to fit a model for a specific task, I will have a list of candidates in my mind and consider which one to choose based on different case. Yeah.
And actually, I just want to amend my answer. I just remembered that when I was at uni, we had some sports class, which was really nice because it was forcing us to go outside, get some fresh air. But I learned to play rugby. I have never touched a rugby ball, and I will never if I can help it. So I think that was the least useful thing I've learned.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So the next question is sort of following up on the previous one. What can you expect when you're working in a company rather than a university?
Well, I think it's a very different environment. When you're, I mean, I worked for a year and a bit as a lecturer at Massey University, and you had to really separate your time between the teaching and the research. And I think it forces you to be in two different headspace, whereas working in industry, you're always in kind of the same headspace. Maybe just the meetings have replaced the teaching part, as Hannah was saying. Um, but I found that the projects that you work on are, first of all, more numerous. So you're not like, I feel like when I was working at university, you have one or two projects that you're pursuing. But here, the number of projects that are working on at the same time is very large. It can be up to, I don't know, maybe 10 projects that you have to keep working on at the same time. And also they are much more applied because in the end, we're trying to answer a question for the industry or something like that. So it's a very different way of looking at things. It's much less fundamental. And the last thing that I would say is you have access to so much more expertise. When you're working at Plant and Food, you're working with your colleagues who can be bioinformatician, plant physiologists, etc. And it's much less, I mean, it's still siloed, but I think at university, it's even more siloed in the sense that maybe you never interact with these people, whereas at Plant and Food, you have to interact with all of them. So you have access to much more expertise, I would say.
Yes, I can relate a lot to like many small projects that I can nibble at, which is very different than having a big sort of bite of the pie, which is your PhD. And you can find projects that are big and you can get your teeth into. It got a lot of hours and you can really develop new techniques, new ways of thinking to try and address those problems. Like in plant food, kiwi fruit have got lots of money. And if you go into that space, you can have lots of purview to really expand your horizons about what we can look at. And that's great. But often there's quite lots of little small projects that need to be ticked along. So that's quite different. Getting your head in and out of projects quickly is something that is you need to learn. And At the moment, plant food doesn't do timesheets, which is really good, but this might change in the future, given the merger. And keeping track of your time is very different. And doing work that isn't just for you. Like you have to make the code reproducible and have it in a way which you can pick it up later on. If you don't, and someone else picks it up, they're just not going to get it. And like it's different to your PhD when you can kind of be learning coding and it's just there for you to do it once and then it's done. Yeah. I think. No, you go, Hannah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you both. And the other things that I can expect in the company now is about the data, like what Olivia said earlier. Like in real world, the data is nothing like the clean data set you get from the university. Like in realistic, your data is often very messy with a lot of missing values, and sometimes there isn't even enough data for you to apply the data interpolation skill you learned from the university, because collecting the full data set in real world is difficult, and often people doesn't know what data will be useful for you to build a models. Yeah, so I also found I spend much more time cleaning and processing the data than actually fitting or training the model. Yeah.
Okay. I think we have time for one or two more questions. So maybe we'll again slow things down, move in a different direction. What do you all think are the hot areas in statistics and data science that will get you lots of attention, get you hired, and yeah.
I think, Tom, you have a good answer for this one, so you should go first.
Yes, well, if I'm on the hiring committee, probably causal inference is the way I kind of see and where we should be going with statistics. When statistics speak is like modeling the data generating process, but causal inference is all done up front before you even start doing the modeling. It's like thinking about how things are related to one another, what covariates are related to one another, and like what do we need to do to work out how we can identify a causal effect between X and Y, given this is how the data was collected and given this is how the variables are related to one another. This is all the thinking that's been done through statistical rethinking through Richard McElreath, and it is really valuable because it really is the glue that links up what scientists think their system is with the statistical modeling, and you can actually embed that with directed acyclic graphs into the modeling process, and is a way to sort of move towards causality and embed like how we think the world works in the modeling to get the result out the other end, rather than seeing modeling as a completely subjective exercise. Sorry, objective exercise. So that's what I think, and Bayesian inference is a good way to do that.
Yeah, for me, I'm biased because I work a lot with large data sets. So in the type of area that I work with, having knowledge about multivariate statistics and good visualization skills I think are a must. And also nowadays, everyone wants to use AI and talk about. A few years ago, they were all talking about machine learning, and now it's AI. So I think just knowing what it is and what it does and what it doesn't do is something that's going to get you far along, because at least when you're talking with people, you can actually have good answers about when they want to wave the magic AI wand on their data. So I think that's a skill it's nice to know at least what people are talking about.
Yes. Yeah, and also like so for the area, I think explainable AI, like able to understand how AI think and the um how the model itself work would be quite interesting. And because we know um the ChatGPT, like the communication, we don't know what happened at the background, like how it actually work. So if we are able to know how it works, yeah, then I think that would be really cool.
Okay, I think we have time to sneak in very quickly one last question, which is sort of following up on what Olivia and Hannah have been saying. So just thinking a bit about the future, what sort of potential applications do you see in using AI, and how do you use AI in your current day-to-day work?
Well, I see a lot of people who talk about using it for coding, and for me, because I've been writing R code for 10 years at this point, so I don't need AI help to write R code. But I would see the potential if, say, I had to move to Python and I knew really well what I wanted to do in R, but I wasn't sure how to do the same in Python. Maybe that could be useful because it could help translate the way of thinking into a different programming language. Otherwise, I think it's really nice when you have something you want to say, like especially because I'm not a native English speaker. Sometimes there are things I want to say, but I'm not quite sure what's the way of saying it in English. So writing emails is the thing that I use it the most for.
Yeah, so in my field, I already using like AI like those model for image analysis and like doing some creating some predictive model and doing automation. Like for example, identify some pattern in the plants. For how I use what I usually use AI to, I usually use it for debugging. Like for example, if I saw some error message, I just paste it and ask it like where is the possible issues to causing this problem. It really save time for me to debug. Yeah, I sometimes also ask it to help me check my grammar. Like when I'm writing email and or writing report, I ask it to check if I make any grammar mistake.
I think AI in terms of like writing code can be useful, but you need to know what you're doing. I would never ever get AI to write a model, but I would get it to help me do a Quarto document or to format something like that, or to say, how would I do this in MPython? That would be okay. You've got to be very careful with it because it can go off on random tangents and like do a very long way to try to do something very simple. But that being said, it does speed up things, especially like writing reports. And if you've got an idea of where you wants to go with the report, then that's good. Yeah, there are like Cursor native IDEs now, like one called Cursor. That is great for that. It essentially can do like track changes. So you say, I want to have a report with multiple tabs and that kind of thing, and it'll go through and then sort of do the changes, and you can look at it. It's like having a junior developer next to you that can kind of sort of double check, but yeah, you need to be careful with it. And yeah, I wouldn't let it do any sort of reasoning or any sort of scientific thinking. Not at this stage anyway.
Yeah, great. Thank you to Olivia, Tom, and Hannah for the questions. So I think we need to jump to the Q&A session with the audience now. We've got 10 minutes left. So do we have any questions from the audience?
I have a question.
Mhm.
I'm Claire Cameron. I'm the director of the Biostats Centre at the University of Otago. Excuse me. Thank you very much for telling us all about your journey. It's a hard start to get into statistics, I think. My question is, you know, from the way you're talking, it sounds like you work in some kind of statistical utopia. Tom, you were saying that everybody knows about generalized linear mixed effects models. And I dream of working in a world where everyone knows about that sort of stuff. And you were also talking about communication and meeting people where they are with their stats. I mean, one of the things that I have struggled with over my life is sort of being duped into thinking people know more stats than they actually do, or underestimating how much stats they know. I'd be interested to hear from you about how you ascertain what other people's knowledge is, and given that you work in a research institute where you have a whole lot of highly skilled experts in different disciplines, presumably they don't all know that much about stats, or I'm just very interested about that side of things if anyone wants to talk about that.
Yeah, so not necessarily so much about statistics, but they certainly know a lot about the domain expertise. And if we can reflect that in, say, a directed graph framework, then I can help embed that into the system modeling and go down the technical side of it. But just understanding how that directed graph matches up with the experimental design, like the blocking effects, etc. That's really important. The same with why we're doing this, why we're randomizing cross variation, or why trying to control for variation and that kind of stuff, like just sort of going through that. And it's all thinking and it's all just circles and arrows, and I do the rest of it.
Because it
just,
is one of the
yeah.
really hard parts of working in applied areas, isn't it?
Yes, because you will have knowledge in that you wanted something really sort of novel up here, but it's too much or it's not appropriate, and you kind of have to set over here, and that's generally fine. Like the world isn't very linear, but we always use linear things. But that is what people understand and where we can meet. And if you start talking about other things, then you lose people. And to be honest, we may not have the statistical power to even go up that level anyway. Often we've got the replication, small experiments down here, and we just need to do something simple enough to say there's a trend.
Don't forget that it's a really huge skill to learn how to do that, how to adjust what you're doing so that other people can see what it is, because what you're doing is highly technical, and for other people to understand why you're doing it, that's a great skill to have. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I can just add something, I agree, Claire, that there are definitely people who will think more in terms of, oh, statisticians or data scientists are just like pressing buttons and you just have to do this analysis, or you just have to tell me that my treatment works. And so it's a skill in communication where you have to remain to find a way of communicating that that's not going to work without just being frustrated and start being not very politically correct. But I think it's usually if you can show your goodwill to discuss with people, maybe it becomes easier. But yeah, of course, there's always different people.
Okay. Thank you for the great question, Claire. Does anyone else have any questions?
Hi everyone. Hello, James. My name is Hui. I have a bit of a open question. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm just in a bit of a strange spot career-wise. So I put this out there just as is this happening to anybody else? Has anybody seen any similarities, in their own statistical, journeys, basically? So I think that with any sort of data job, right, you have like the broad spectrum all the way from the data engineering to the ETL, analytics, and then modeling at the end of that pipeline. And I think it's all good, it's all good. There's no hierarchy in my mind. I'm just towards the modeling side of things. And then within that sort of, branch of the broad data jobs, I think the sort of big modeling places is like, big pharma or big finance and actuaries and AI/ML. But I'm not like specialized in any of those. I'm sort of very generic. I do a lot of regression, mixed modeling, sort of post hoc causal inferences, basically likelihood based stuff. So I'm kind of finding myself like a generic statistician almost, and I'm kind of finding myself in like a kind of cul-de-sac because I don't do pharma or finance style statistics or like AI/ML style statistics, and I don't really do the ETL sort of data engineering sort of stuff. And I'm just wondering if anybody else, what I mean, has noticed that sort of pathway, or maybe I'm just not seeing something about what I mean, right? The sort of more generic statistics, career paths. Just any comments. Maybe I'm just wrong about the landscape. You know what I mean? Yeah, just any comments basically.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, when you were saying that, I feel like it's kind of a big part of our team here at Plant and Food. You need to have this generic knowledge because the project that you are given are always a little bit different, and so you always need to know a little bit of a different solution to cater for the project. So I see what you mean, but I feel like in places like Plant and Food or similar research institute where you're in more of a consultant role, that would work really well because we're definitely not in the human space, so we don't have these big data sets that come from human, and it's more like smaller scale experiments that you have to analyze. So the data looks always a bit different, and so I think it's not necessarily a bad thing not to be specialized into one corner of the modeling part. I think it's a good thing to have experience in all of these different modeling techniques.
I think we're nearly out of time. Excellent. That closes the webinar session for today. I just wanted to thank Olivia, Tom, and Hannah again for taking the time out to talk to us, and also for Muskan for helping to arrange the webinar in the first place. I hope you all got something out of the session today. Please follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. And of course, stay tuned on our Facebook page for updates and future events. I'm going to hand things off to Muskan just to close the session out.
Thank you, James, and our guest speakers. This was really engaging session. And while you were like sharing your experiences, I felt like, okay, I should jump in and I resonate with this so much. But yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. And as James has said, we will have more events coming soon. So just stay in touch with us, keep tuned, and we'll see you next time. Takite.